Since the first settlers traveled by ship to the New World, towns and cities have flanked the mighty rivers of the Northeast. As the Industrial Revolution swept across the region, the usefulness of the river as power for manufacturing became apparent. Connecticut rivers are particularly well adapted to industry, and communities quickly sprang up on the banks of the Connecticut, Housatonic, Thames, and Naugatuck rivers. It was during the hurricane of 1938 that Connecticut residents got their first taste of the awesome power of Mother Nature. The region was devastated by flash floods, and this new threat loomed heavy in the minds of many. But it would take a catastrophic event almost 20 years later to alter the perception of life in the river valley.
"19 inches of torrential rains falling in 60 hours over 6 Northeast states bring about the worst flood disaster in recorded American history. Already drenched by the downpour accompanying Hurricane Connie a week previous, swollen streams run amok through one of the most populous and industrial sections of the nation.
I think the amount of rain that we had before the flood would have been about 15 inches. That's a number that I sort of recall, but I think it possibly could have even been more.
And it couldn't have rained any harder. It came down in buckets.
But it just seemed like it rained and continued to rain and continued to rain, and then the river just came up.
Well, I first got involved because I was civil defense director at the time, and the morning of the flood, about 4 o'clock, I got a telephone call that they needed a boat up in Ansonia.
By 7 o'clock, it was starting to come over the track. We decided that we better start moving things out of our basement, and we hadn't been in there, I wouldn't say perhaps 20 minutes, when the Kinneytown Dam let go, and then that knocked out the Maple Street Bridge, threw it on the west side of town, and we had water in here.
George O'Donnell took the boat and tried to go across to get to the other side where it wasn't running so fast. And when he started about with the boat, the boat just slipped over.
I was rushing through the main street, yes. It was just like you were out in the middle of the Naugatuck River the way it was coming down the street, yes.
A couple of the Derby firemen, there the water had spread out so you could operate. They swam out, pulled him in. He was in bad shape. He was in the hospital for about a week before they were able to release him.
This region had seen floods before, but nothing of this magnitude.
There was helicopters taking people off the roofs of buildings here in town. The people that were stuck in, mainly trapped in buildings, would go up onto the roof, and the helicopters would pick them up and drop them up at our field up on the west side of town.
Basically, you had a situation where you had, in some cases, 5-6 feet of water just rushing through at very high rates of speed, washing out buildings, washing away buildings, washing away bridges. Seymour in particular was probably the worst hit in the Naugatuck Valley. Entire neighborhoods, entire streets were just erased.
We had heavy water running down our street from about, I'd say, 10 o'clock in the morning, and the sun came out maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. By 3 o'clock we had a big island of mud out there, island of mud in here, and the water was back in this riverbed. It just seemed like a bathtub where you pull the plug out and the bottom ran out.
But the tragedy has struck most deeply in the scores of small towns such as Naugatuck, Rhode Island, and Ansonia, Connecticut, which have been virtually destroyed, with a loss of life that now exceeds 200. Throughout the flood area, scores are missing, and the grim death toll may go higher.
The west side, West Ansonia, you had a lot of residential areas which were just wiped away. Moving down to Derby and Shelton, their industries were particularly hard hit, which was a very devastating blow to the aging power plants already. Nobody was not affected by what happened in 1955.
That's what it was. I mean, if it was out of control, there's nothing much you could do. The water was so strong. It just came, and we had never had any experience in that either.
As far as being devastation, it was something that didn't really appreciate seeing, but there's not a thing you can do with it. It's here, and it happens so quick, all you can do is pull up your bootstraps and go back to work again.
The Army Corps of Engineers was brought in to survey the scene, and the construction of dikes and riprap began almost immediately. This was a disaster on the national level, and federal aid quickly arrived in the area.
Well, Abraham Ribicoff did his best to coordinate the relief efforts in the Naugatuck Valley, up to and including trying to get the area, and successfully getting the valley declared a federal disaster area. This led to a lot of funds pouring into the valley that were much needed at the time.
Governor Ribicoff was here giving us any assistance that we needed. He looked both in Seymour, Derby, Ansonia.
The city of New Haven in particular sent a lot of assistance up what is now Route 34. Probably 100 trucks from the city of New Haven came up. The federal aid which came into the valley, thanks to Ribicoff and others, was long-term.
They decided they're going to go forward. They got to protect the area, and they did. They built the dikes and put the flood walls in, and the government spent an awful lot of money in the valley after that flood.
President Eisenhower's scene was very necessary and quite a morale booster. I believe it was Air Force One, or I don't know if it was called that, did fly the entire length of the Naugatuck Valley, not just the lower Naugatuck Valley, but the whole area. He saw the scene from the air. Later, he, by Sikorsky helicopter, I believe, landed in Shelton. And from there, the president had a pretty good view of what was happening in the Naugatuck Valley. He could clearly see all the way up to Ansonia.
Yet it was the resiliency and sense of cooperation in the valley communities that spurred the recovery from the devastating effects of the flood.
We never worked like that in that kind of situation before, but as I said, everybody chipped in and did a heck of a job. Every one of the fire departments and the police departments in the valley can be proud of what they did.
The geographic nature of the lower Naugatuck Valley was such that it really did function as one large community. So you already had a regional identity already, and there really was a coming together. I mean, this was far beyond the capacity of any town to clean up. And the valley towns were used to working together, and working together they did help reclaim their downtowns.
As early as 1932, congressional meetings were held to determine the need for a dam in the upper Naugatuck River Valley. Yet it was only after the devastation of the '55 flood that plans to build the Thomaston Dam just north of Waterbury were put into motion. Groundbreaking began almost immediately, and the dam was completed just 5 years later in 1960.
The overall role of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for Thomaston Dam in particular is flood control or flood damage reduction. The Thomaston Dam in the Naugatuck River Basin works as a system of reservoirs to reduce flood flows in the downstream communities below the dam, Thomaston, Waterbury, Naugatuck, Ansonia, and Derby, all the way down to the mouth of the Housatonic River.
The addition of dikes and a large dam capable of holding back almost 14 billion gallons of water exists, but is it enough to prevent this type of disaster from happening again?
The dam works to impound water and lower river stages to keep the flow of the river within its banks below the dam and to minimize property damage. In simple terms, the Thomaston Dam, as many of these flood damage reduction projects work, similar to the bathtub in your house, where the water builds up behind it and is controlled until safe water releases can be made downstream. The Naugatuck River Basin in particular is a narrow valley with rocky hillsides. When it rains hard, it's a flashy river.
Today, Ansonia, along with most towns in the valley, have recovered from the flood. It is mostly forgotten, rarely discussed. The river flows gently through Ansonia and Derby, a distant cry from the raging river which devastated the region 50 years ago. But how quickly things can change.
So the roads near the rivers, or near the Middletown area of the Connecticut River, rather, will become impassable by Tuesday. Same deal on the Housatonic, where we are expecting the flooding to continue for much of the week. The river will crest late Monday.
I lived here 18 years, and tell you what, I don't know. This river, I never saw it get like this ever, any time in my life. Biggest I ever saw it.
It concerns me. There's an area over here across the river up the ways that is called the Maples, and they always get flooded out.
So we'll continue to monitor the rivers over the next few days. Our next concern, if you do live close to these rivers, is coming up Thursday night and Friday. It's early. It's a little ways out there, but the possibility exists for 1 or 2 inches of rain by then.
And this has never been this high here before. I've been fishing here for 10, 15 years, and it's never been this high.
The threat of a similar scenario to the Great Flood of 1955 is not likely. But if Mother Nature unleashed a similar storm, could this happen again?
As far as 55's rain, we've had heavy rains here, but not the length of time. We've had, that was perhaps 5 days of rain, severe heavy rains, and a large amount of rain, but not that I've ever seen anything as bad as that. Not enough to bring the river up like this did.
I hope you and I aren't around, because we'll be drowned with this, what they got on, what all the dikes and all the dams that they have built. If it ever gets like it was that day, we're all going to be gone. It was really something. It was a unusual situation.
And the question must be asked, who wins in the end, man or Mother Nature?
Mother Nature gets mad enough. She can handle any situation that a man can build.
If a similar situation occurred today, most likely man would win. However, there's always one worse storm always on the horizon. We've greatly increased the odds that we could survive a nightmare like that. But you know what? You can never underestimate what nature can do.
One thing is certain, however, man will continue to challenge the strength of Mother Nature now and into the future.